So if anyone has any points to chit-chat about, questions or statements, Dan at the back does. And then Dan, after you, the gentleman over to your left. So Dan's first. Let's hear it. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
So this is a question about the four joys.
Uh-huh.
In the 100-syllable mantra, at one part of the mantra, there is ha, 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 four has, four empowerments, four kayas, four immeasurables, and four joys. Are these the four joys that that's referring to?
Sure.
Yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
I mean, that's one interpretation of ha, 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 ho. In the Vajrasattva mantra, Om Bidzasapa Samaya Manapaliya Bidzasapa Dinabatrita Drita Memosaka Anuranda Memboa Siravasiti Me Priyatsa Saravakana Suchame Chiram Shriyam Korahung Ha 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 Ho. One of the main explanations of those five ha 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 ho as the five Buddha families. And the first ha 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 are everyone except Amoga Siddhi. His left out and his special. Because Amoga Siddhi represents Buddha karma or Buddha activity. And although we talk about Buddha activity, in Tantric practice, we can only really do Buddha activity when we are a Buddha. And so that sort of statement is sometimes made. So it's an expression of our Buddhahood. So when we practice Tantra, we do the four trinle, peace, increase, power, and wrath, which is the fifth Buddha karma, Amoga Siddhi. But as a practice, not as a actual. In other words, until we're enlightened, it's a practice of expressing our creative Buddha energies. But in Buddhahood, it's a natural release, like a water flowing over a waterfall, compared to pumped water, I suppose, you could say. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. My question, you mentioned in one of the stories about smoking a cigarillo, and I was wondering if that has some sort of effect on the tummo or the salong practices.
Oh, that's referring to a kind of, from South India, they make these little beedis, cigarettes called beedis, which are made out of a leaf of a plant called tengtu. And they put a tiny little bit of organic tobacco down the middle of them. And they smell very aromatic. And so whenever I was once smoking, I gave up smoking cigarettes long ago, but I smoked those from time to time for a while. I was once smoking one in Toronto in a bank, and two policemen came in to do some police business. One of them said to me, "Sir, we're very liberal about these things, but you shouldn't smoke that in front of us." I said, "Oh, this is just like a beedi from South India. It's not what you think it is." "Sir, I was not born yesterday. Do not press me on this point." I said, "Oh, okay." So that's what I was smoking in Lhasa. The night someone's stuff was robbed from one of the 5 or 6 people in the hotel who hadn't locked their doors. They had little things stolen. In this case, it was a $25,000 Rolex, but a small Rolex, just a little watch, and maybe some diamond earrings, I think. So not that much.
So just about...
So I was smoking one of those, and so the Chinese police were like, "What could that be?" "Oh, it's an aphrodisiac, a rare aphrodisiac." And so, "Oh, can we have some?" "I don't know." Is your wife very strong? So we all became friends by the end of that conversation.
So just does...
So I think smoking or not smoking anything, and different cultures have different sacred substances. I mean, North American natives had a kind of tobacco, more organic than you'll find in Marlboros and those kind of things. And they called it smoking the peace pipe, and often in the evening they would pass it around even amongst the members of the whoever was at that get-together. And at big ceremonies, exchanging that was kind of a sign. I remember when I brought over Tibetan Lamas to tour North America, and we went, Tibetan Lamas don't like to smoke cigarettes because there's a Nyingma terma which came up after tobacco appeared in Asia. Someone dreamed of Guru Rinpoche, and Guru Rinpoche said, in the dream, Guru Rinpoche says, well, when Padmasambhava came to Tibet, he chased out the 9 kind of demons, and one of them was having her menstrual cycle, and drops of her menstrual blood fell on the earth and gave rise to tobacco. So therefore, Tibetans don't like to smoke tobacco. Whether it is born from the menstrual blood of one of the 9 types of demons, I'm not sure. We will need more chemical research on that issue. And also whether or not then you would smoke it depends on your ideas towards menstrual blood, I suppose. Things born from menstrual blood. But so Tibetans don't smoke. And we'd visit North American natives, and very often the natives would offer them a pipe with tobacco, and the lamas would always look at me like, do I have to? Sort of like going into a restaurant in Spain where they're eating paella, and you get all these little fish with whiskers looking at you, smiling with that big eyeballs. Like, Glenn, do I have to eat those things? But yeah, so whether things help or hurt, tummo practice is more, I think, with how you use something than what it is. Like the greatest Nyingma Lama of the last 200 years was probably Dujum Lingpa, and he was a chain smoker. And Alan Wallace, who's one of the sort of great American teachers of Tibetan Buddhism, translates quite a few of his things and regards his lineages as very, very important in his life. But he was a chain smoker, Dujum Lingpa. And when he came to people's houses to do poa on a dead person, he'd often get invited to help transfer their consciousness out of states of hesitation directly toward the Pure Lands. And he'd take out apparently he had a cigarette holder, very long like this, sort of one of those ones like Greta Garbo used to use. And he'd take out that and he'd go on the person's head and put his cigarette out on the poa spot. So it's not what you do, I think, but how you do it, which is the big issue in Tantric Buddhism.
Did you have any other questions?
No, that was just a question.
Ed had one.
I know. And I have a couple things.
Earlier this
but I'll let Ed ask his first.
Earlier this morning, when talking about the Sangha, you said they were working on 3 dimensions of being. What are those 3 dimensions?
3-dimensional beings probably talking about the 3 kayas, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. And when before enlightenment, these are not 3 kayas, but they're bodies, mind, speech, and body. But speech here not referring to words we say, but to the thoughts and emotions that come together to generate what we say. So therefore, we put a white Om in the crown chakra because everything we experience through the body is processed through the senses as signaling to the brain, and the throat, speech, for emotions and thoughts, because according to the Tantric way of thinking, our thyroidic energies influence our emotions and our thought patterns very deeply on a subliminal level. And then heart for Dharmakaya.
Thank you.
So when we practice Tantra, the main difference between Sutra and Tantra is we think of our mind as kind of the rider, the horse pulling the cart, which is our life. And so we should be very careful with our thinking, controlling our mind, controlling our anger and our attachments and our prides and our envies and sort of the klesha, those kind of things. And we identify with ourselves as an unenlightened being trying to tame the wild monkey mind on the way to enlightenment. Whereas Tantra more tries to look at the quality of ourself which shares the enlightenment connection, you could say, enlightenment quality. And simply by resting in awareness of it with the Tantric Samaya, we're able to bypass that process. So in what we spoke about this morning, the three kayas, we try to think of our inner sense of the vast spaciousness of being as our Dharmakaya nature. So in meditation, we dissolve the world into light, into us, into our body, and we just sit in that radiance for a while and try to develop a familiarity with our own inner formless nature, beyond form nature, you could say, our own inner radiance. And that's really connected. The purpose of that expedition, meditative expedition, is to get a grip on our inner stillness so that everything we do comes from that inner depth rather than be waves on the surface of the ocean that's coming up from the depths of the ocean of our clarity. And as I said earlier, then expresses itself as joy and radiance of Sambhogakaya. In the case of chakra samvara and so forth, as the indestructible drop. Until enlightenment, our male and female energies, our aggression and our passion, go together hand in hand, sort of dancing all the way to enlightenment. In enlightenment, those two dissolve, and there is the beyond indestructible drop. The drop is dissolved. And we become a universal being, rather than one being driven by these two forces, you could say. Yeah.
Anybody else have a question? All right, I just wanted to say, I this links back to what Dan was talking about, I think, or what you were talking about, the ha whole. And I have a sadhana I like very much that talks about cities and granting you cities. And one of the things it says is, grant me the city of ever-increasing Buddha activity. But I get your point about you can't really do any Buddha activity till you are a Buddha. But isn't it really kind of the same idea as seeing everyone else as Buddhas, you know, when you're doing Tantra, as theater, and you're a Buddha and this person is a Buddha, and that's how we're going to see them, and I'm going to plant these seeds in my own subconscious mind, so I act more along the lines of a Buddha.
Yeah, that difference is made, I think, with the five Buddhas and Buddha Ratnasambhava. The same difference is made in the presentation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And Chogyam Trungpa, in his translation with Francesca Fremantle of it, and he puts a little commentary. I mean, she translates it, retranslates it, I guess, from the Evans Wentz translation in accordance with Trungpa's reading of it to a group teaching out in Colorado. And they discuss, Trungpa mentions and discusses that issue in some depth. So when we practice, we mainly try to see our body as a body of deity, our emotions and thoughts as great bliss and great radiance, and our mind as having the primordial radiance of Mother Clear Light. So those three, I guess you would say, are the main issue. And then Yunden, Kusuntok Yunden Tinle, body, speech, mind, excellences. We try to celebrate the excellences, I guess you would say, the Yunden. And then everything we do, we regard as Buddha activity, because we're seeing ourselves as a Buddha. So whatever we do is a Buddha activity. But I think there's just I don't know why it's presented in that kind of a way so much. And my guess, my omniscient guess, is that because there's a little bit difference between the sort of natural fluidity of the enlightened mind, activity in the enlightened mind, and in the unenlightened mind, when we're doing the practice as though this were Buddha activity, there's still some sort of obscuration, you could say, of by the curtain or the veil of duality or something like that. I think that's the meaning generally. But I was never very aware of it as a talking point, I would say, until I never heard it mentioned by Dalai Lama in any discourse or Lingam Rinpoche or Trijun Rinpoche. It must be said somewhere. I just didn't pick it up when they said it. And I was reading Francesca Fremantle's, and then I came across it in reference to the Vajrasattva mantra. And I think it's just to do with that the free flow of enlightenment energy is a little different, is a little more subtle. So it's like the last thing we do in Buddhahood in a completely fluid way. So with some of my students who take up the tummo, I often recommend that they do each sort of step for a week or 2 weeks or something like that in the actual tummo practice. Different Tibetan commentaries and traditions cut up the tummo practice in different ways or different stages. And but they all have the generation stage as the foundation, which is the 3 kayas, which we did. And then they all have the 9-round breathing, which we covered this morning, and they all have the vase breathing as the first of 6 or 8 yantras. And there can be many more yantras. There can be a few dozen of them. And in one commentary, I mentioned the Drukpa Kargyu have the biggest plethora of tummo exercises, with 108 of them. I think these are just different ways of doing much the same, but also borrowing from other traditions of yantra yoga, meaning they didn't all come from Naropa directly to Marpa, to Milarepa, to Gampopa. The Drukpa later integrated other yantras or physical exercises done in other traditions, Nyingma, Bon. Like Drukpa is probably the Kargyu school that has the deepest link to various Nyingma lineages. So I think they probably borrow those yantras from quite a few of those Nyingma lineages. And of course the Bunpo, which is often called the pre-Buddhist indigenous school, but it's not really. It's really the Buddhism, I think, of the East Persian Empire. They have a lot of yantras in their various, what they call salung tigle, nadi, chakra, drop, nadi, chakra, bindu, And every highest yoga tantra has nadi, chakra, bindu practices. And different tantras and different lineages, oral tradition, they just combine those in different ways. So Gampopa's main lineage went to Pamo Trukpa, and I often mention, this is always mentioned, that when Gampopa became old, he gave his hat to Pamo Trukpa. So that sort of became the main lineage of 6 yogas at that time. And Pamo Trukpa emphasized just 6. So that's sort of, you could say, the purest form of the way Marpa transmitted to Milarepa transmitted to Gampopa. But Gampopa had 4 disciples, and each of those created their own school of Tibetan Buddhism, all with the last name Kargyu, because that's the name that Marpa gave to his lineage. The instruction lineage, literally meaning instruction lineage. Ka is often used for word of Buddha lineage. Buddha is a word of Buddha lineage. And each of those was in a different part of Tibet. So those guys went home and created practice hermitages and set up little Dharma centers. And some of them became bigger and others became medium, and some over the centuries sort of became very small and became sort of merged with other schools and stuff like that. And when they went to those different areas, those lamas also integrated other practices into the 6 yogas from other tantras they like to take up. Like if they had a Nyingma teacher, they may bring in whatever yantras were practiced in that Nyingma lineage, or a Bonpo teacher, and so on. But these 6 are listed as Pamo Trukpa's favorites. You could say Pamo Trukpa's indispensables. And if you break them down a little bit, they can become 8 or 10 just by doing mild variations of them. So we could say Pamo Trukpa's top 10 list. Have you watched remember the Dave Letterman show when he used to do top 10 list? So these are Pamo Trukpa's top 10, you could say. And they began with the vase breathing, and then the tummy twirl, and then the extension and the snap. And they go on to a number of others, which we'll look at later. But then after doing those, then usually we do what's called the empty body, which is the energies have now been sort of, the female energies of the marcha, the female power, has been increased in one's body. The female chemistry, the bindu have been released, generated and balanced. And so the next stage is a sense of trying to generate a sense of the body as a very weightless, buoyant, insubstantial phenomena. And so if we can do that for a few minutes, we just imagine that we just finished those first 3 exercises we did this morning. Because if we do them again after eating beans, I'm not sure what will happen in this room. And so we won't do those. We'll just skip to the empty body. And so after doing the yantra, usually for about 5 minutes of the session, one just simply sits with a sense of the body like an empty balloon, you could say. So no flesh and blood or bone or anything like that. And even the skin of the balloon is made of pure energy, sort of like a rainbow. So it's like nectar inside of a rainbow filament, kept inside by a rainbow filament, and looking kind of Buddha-like. So like in this illustration of the chakras, is given a kind of something of a Buddha form. I'm not sure what those things are on the side. At first I thought they were kind of wrestlers' cauliflower ears, but I guess it's actually his hairdo, yeah? So just to sort of rest the mind on the sense of the body as being like a balloon filled with pure energy. So the word in Tibetan lung means air, but the lung there being the universal energy that from which all things in the universe are made. The prana that serves as the building substances for all form, all physical things. And we just do that for, 5 minutes or something. Yeah. And then the next thing we try to do, and when one trains in that in tummo with a local teacher in a valley or a village in Tibet, the Himalayas, then you do the empty body for a week or so or something like that to get a strong sense of the pure energy nature of the body. And then you do the next one, which is putting the 3 energy channels. And these are put in different ways in different tantras, but here we just start from the middle of the skull, like where the third eye would be, often painted as a third eye on Buddhist paintings. And a channel going from here back to the center of the brain, and then curving down just in front of the spine to 4 finger widths below the navel. And from the right nostril going in and going up and to the center of the brain, and going down beside the other. And this going up and going down beside the other. And when they come to the crown chakra, the center of the brain, the wrap around, this goes up and wraps around 3 times, and this goes up and wraps around 3 times. Comes down to the throat and wraps around 3 times, down to the crown, wraps around 3 times, down to the navel, wraps around 3 times. Then goes down and curls up into the central channel. So you can see something like that in this beautiful illustration. We're doing this on video. La da 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 da, to do. La da da dum ba da, to do, to do, to do, to do. On the 2 cameras. Oh, Samit has a question with the microphone? Or I can just repeat the question if you...
So if we would do the vase breathing for a week or 2.
Well, the yantras together, yeah.
And then the twisting of the belly for another week or 2.
Something like that.
And then empty body.
Yeah, twisting and snapping. There's actually 6, as I mentioned, 6 to 8 or 10 of these yantras. I don't know if you do each of them individually. I think you do all of them together for a week or 2.
Okay. And then the empty body.
And then the empty body, yeah.
And then the regular.
And I think it's before doing the empty body, you do the yantras and you just add that on. And I think it's to try to get used to the different feeling you have in your normal workaday or meditative states, walking around or on your meditation cushion, how your energies feel like that, and how they feel after you've stimulated or aroused the release of the drops of the female, so-called female drops, the marcha, the red element, into your blood. So when you do the breathing and then you do the vas and you do this other physical exercises, you have a distinctly different energy change. You can feel it very strongly. Everyone becomes more wise. And the wisdom factor in Buddhism, as I always point out, doesn't refer to being more intelligent or making better decisions or anything like that, or giving better advice, but you have a fluctuation in the state of consciousness. I think the meaning really is your consciousness just becomes more spacious, more open. So prajna in that sense is the consciousness format that acts as the basis of experience. And so as one does, for a week, you do those yantras and you get familiar with them. And the next step with doing the empty body is you notice that when these energies have been aroused, and then you sit like this, noticing the energies, you become more aware of how the red element, the increase of the power of the red element, transforms your state of mind, makes your consciousness more joyful and more spacious, something like that. And so in the beginning we just do in that very general way, and the next point is to centralize them down the body, which was what happens with the visualization of the central energy channels. Yes, you were going to say something?
Isn't there also, once you get all this going, a karmic component, karmic release? It helps you to release karma. That,
Yeah.
helps karma, limitations of karma.
Well, when we talk about vas breathing in terms of 6 yogas, the main purpose is to generate an energy platform serving as the basis of consciousness. So mind rides on energy like a man on a horse. I often quote that very famous statement from Tantra. So when you refine your inner energies, your consciousness becomes refined. And the 6 Yogas of Naropa is talking about it from the perspective of achieving enlightenment. And if we look at it from other sides, say health benefits, and certainly the same lineage, a similar lineage coming through Milarepa, but coming from a different line, not from Naropa, emphasizes tummo as a health and longevity, healing and longevity practice. So that's a very common application. So it certainly helps that. But in terms of karma, I think basically karma I think the sense you're using it as karma as a kind of a throwing force. In other words, our kind of karmic momentum, what Tibetans call legi paksha, karmic instincts of behavior, instincts of destiny, patterns of destiny. And how do our instincts of destiny affect us, and how do our patterns of destiny affect us? They affect us through our mind, through our consciousness. Karmic seeds, I may have a karmic seed making me an angersome person or a violent person. But that instinct needs to meet particular circumstances to be sprouted. I will only become angry or violent under certain conditions. So when we do tummo practice and create a superior consciousness platform, there's less chance of those seeds getting there, being aroused. So when we immediately do this practice, it doesn't have the effect of purifying those karmic seeds. It just has the effect of generating a state of consciousness which is not as vulnerable to negative karma, our negative karmic instincts. You know, for instance, we in the West, we love movies on jewel thieves. There's probably more jewel thief movies than almost any movie. Any bank rob, like train robber movies used to be more popular. But then train travel's kind of gone down in popularity. So jewel thief movies are still very popular. And we all have that instinct, I think a kleptomaniac instinct. And that's why people like it. They can, I could be that jewel thief. I could grab that jewel and such a little thing and just only that big, and I'd be like a billionaire and could live on have apartments in New York and Chicago and Bermuda and maybe one down in Panama City, watching the boats go by. But unless the conditions arise where we can get our pinkies on a $10 million diamond and get away with it, we don't get the apartments. So I think the point of karma here is this level of practice purifies the platform, you could say. And later when we talk about illusory body and clear light yogas, which are the two aspects of tummo practice and how they develop it, those are more talking about releasing the karmic seeds or dissolving. So we talk about two levels of illusory body, unpurified and purified. So on a very subtle level, our energies that support our consciousness, driving it from moment to moment, day to day, and week to week, month to month, lifetime to lifetime. You could say it's the subtle driving Legilung in Tibetan karmic energies. And those are basically karmic seeds having their own driving force. So the ultimate purpose of tummo is to achieve enlightenment by untying the knots. So here, when these wrap around, later we see each of these four chakras are associated with one of the four Buddhas. Ha, 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 ha. And ho is not there yet. So sometimes we'll put Varochana, Amitabha, Akshobhya. No, Varochana, Amitabha, Akshobhya, and Ratnasambhava at the navel chakra. And Amoga Siddhi is hanging around in some private place, so to speak. And he comes up Amoga Siddhi becomes instrumental then in the arousing of the force arousing and releasing the four joys or the four blisses or the four ecstasies. So we could say that the knots around the crown chakra are something to do with the bindings or karmic bindings associated with our relationship with the physical world, our sense of a physical world. The knots around the throat are a little bit associated with our bindings or limitations emotionally and intellectually or conceptually. I myself, for instance, am a very emotional and conceptual kind of a guy. That's because my bindings are totally released. Otherwise, I would be like this. Yes. Another question? No. Next question? Yes. Next question? No. But because I'm more emotional than conceptual, I can wax eloquent with great humor. And around the heart chakra, our basic the constriction of our kind of smooth mental flow, you could say, our openness, our smooth mental consciousness. And then the knots around our navel chakra are a little bit to do, you could say, with our inability, or our ability or inability, whichever way we're looking at it, to experience pleasure and joy in everything that we do. As I often mention, and as mentioned in many of these texts, in Kalachakra we say when the drops come to this crown, that's waking state consciousness. So when you get a lot of energy in the center of your brain, you're wide awake. When it comes to the throat chakra, the drops in the energies, thus in sleep you have very great dreams, or in daylight time when you're awake, you're sort of drifting off with creative thoughts and creative emotions. But anyway, the knots constricting the navel chakras, so here it's our sort of dreamy and conceptual and emotional. So when people have sort of thyroidic energies, questions, they either become overly emotive or sort of lethargically emotive. That sort of statement is made in tantric texts. And the heart, the drop of deep sleep. And deep, when we're awake, deep relaxation, and when we're asleep, dreamless, deep dreamless sleep. And the knots constricting means when we're awake, it's hard for us to be completely relaxed. Or when we're asleep, it's hard for us to enter deep, completely restful sleep. And then knots constricting the navel chakra. This is in Kalachakra called the drop of bliss, or the drop of the drop of ecstasy. So the Kalachakra system, and I think many people here probably have Kalachakra from Dalai Lama at one point or another, because I think he's given it about 30 or 35 times, something like that. The last time in America was in Washington, D.C., to about, 15,000 people or something like that, 10 to 15,000 people. Which is small, because in Asia, when he gives it, it's often 300,000. So in Kalachakra, they talk about the whole path to enlightenment as the yoga of the 4 drops. Learning how to be awake right, how to have perfect awakeness, perfect sleep and conceptuality, and perfect rest and perfect joy. But of course, the 4 drops that we invoke in the 6 yogas and in all of the highest yoga tantra systems, those 4 joys are associated with those same 4 chakras. Although in the invocation of the drop of innate or born together with primordial mind, the 5th chakra, the secret chakra, is also involved. So then we would, for the next period, we'd just centralize the energy like that. So we did the yantra, we did the physical exercises, and we sat with body and sort of this, just appreciating the kind of, or noticing or reveling in, or what is it they do with Tibetan singing bowls? They call it gong bath, or Tibetan singing bowl bath, taking a bath in the singing bowls. Here we take a bath in our the energy is released by igniting the red element. So when the navel, the drops of the solar plexus, the female drops, that female fire or the ferocious woman is awakened. And this great wave of warmth and energy goes over the body and mind. Just resting in that for a few moments. And then we begin by just putting in the 3 energy channels. As I mentioned in this illustration, it's like the side channels are very far away from the central channel. And he did that from the purpose of artistic license, I think you could say. If you put them too close, you wouldn't see them. It's just like a whole bunch of little lines. And he did it as a line drawing, so you can't tell. If you do it as like a white, red, and blue, then you can do it much closer because the color will differentiate what's what and where's where. But otherwise, if it's just lines, and if you don't bring them out like that, you won't be able to tell what's going on. So it's, and he didn't invent this. He copied it from a traditional Tibetan yogic manual, if you will. And there's a question at the back.
So is the left channel the male and the right the female? And then if so, is it also the left nostril is the male and the right nostril female?
In general, I think we say that the right side of the body is your male side and the left side is a little bit more female energy. That's statements that are made. But in terms of the male and female tantra, when we practice male tantra, we put the white, when we practice male tantra, we put the right side channel is white and the left is red. And the center is of a kind of a bluish white with little streaks of color in it. But in female tantra, in Six Yogas of Naropa, the tummo is based on female tantra or mother tantra or yogini tantra, chakra sambhara and so forth. So in that, the right is red and the left is white. And I think that's because our right side is male, so putting the female on the right sort of emphasizes the female energy or balances that natural male energy. I think the logic or the thinking and the rationale is somewhere along those lines.
And so do the nostrils, does the channel stay on the same side as the nostril, or does it cross?
Right, it comes over and it just sort of goes zing, 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 down. This one goes in and goes zing, 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 down. So normally it just says twirls around 3 times. I'm not sure why the number 3 is used, perhaps for all things physical, all things emotional, and all things spiritual, those 3 dimensions of being, perhaps. Perhaps to do with the 3 klesha, attachment. No, first is like anger, irritation, fear. The second is passion, attachment, addiction, fear of loss of stuff. And the third, either lackadaisical thinking. I notice one or two of you after lunch, you start suffering from lackadaisical thinking. But not if you have vegetarian lunch, but if you have a very large lunch. It's very tough in Korea because rice is our number 1 food. And rice is a very soporific food. It's very easy to take a nap after lunch if you had a lot of rice. So when I lead retreats in the Zen monasteries in Korea, I always say, cut out the rice, put in noodles, because it is more soporific which way it's very nice at night. Rice before you go to sleep is very easy on digestion and makes for a more smooth and deep sleep, I think. But yes, the 3 could be connected to those 3 basic klesha as are referred to. Both consciousness as kind of a fuzzy, timuk in Tibetan means kind of often translated as bewilderment, Anyway, confusion is easy to come to terms with, although it's hard to see it necessarily as a klesha, isn't it? Bewilderment, who's got a clue what that means? I'm bewildered. What?
People have a clue what bewilderment means.
Some people might, but that doesn't mean they have the correct understanding. It's one of those words which is very bewildering. Yeah, anyway, it also means avidya, not knowing, in the sense of not understanding, not knowing in the deeper sense of not understanding the fluidity of the self. Not knowing meaning not knowing the nature of self, which leads to bewilderment or confusion or lackadaisical thinking. There's lots can be said about all three of those, because when you sort of get more expansive, it goes down to what they call the 84,000 kleshas, all of which are rooted in these three. And I brought along a book here with a list and a pie chart. But I think the three have all those different levels of meaning. And in our conscious life, the way the kleshas work, and in our emotional life, the way they work, in our spiritual life, the way they work, and in our experience of the simple pleasure of being alive, the way they work. And sometimes we expand the chakras to be 5 and 6 and 7. But in the female tantras, they emphasize these 4 for the basic practice. So let's just do that for a few moments. We try to have the sense of the three. And they often said the central one is large enough to have a half a chickpea, a little bit wider than half a chickpea. And I think the chickpea is like if you cut a chickpea in half. So it's half a chickpea turned like with the round side down, rather than sitting upright, like not half the thickness of a chickpea, but it's the thickness a little bit thicker than a chickpea. Yeah. And the side ones are about half that thickness. And coming in through the side nostrils and going up to the center and curling around, and the three move like that. And down to the navel chakra. And below the navel, the side channels just curl into the central channel. So as we breathe in, it's just as we breathe in, the energies come in and goes in through the side channels all the way down, and as we breathe out, they go. The energy just kind of flows up through the central channel. And the red on the side, on the right, and the left is white, and the center is kind of bluish with white and reddish streaks. Yeah. So this process, it's known in Tibetan as building the Vajra body. And it's based on this idea that we simultaneously have 3 levels of physicality and 3 levels of mental presence, 3 dimensions of physicality, 3 dimensions of mental presence. So the 3 levels of physicality are basic physical level of flesh and blood, flesh and bone, and the 5 senses that operate through them, and the sensory data rising and falling. So that's called in Tibetan Lu Rakpa, or the coarse physicality. And the consciousness arising from them are known as samrakpa, coarse consciousness, coarse mind. And 90% of our consciousness, the content that we're aware of, is that. Oh my God, there's an elephant. I was driving down the street of Delhi one time and came around a corner on my motorcycle. And there was an elephant on the wrong side of the road. 90% of our consciousness rotates around objects of the senses, things we see, smell, taste, touch, and hear. And we're mostly aware of that content of consciousness, you could say. So that's what's known as the coarse body and coarse mind. The mind aware of sensory data. The mind riding on the energies of sensory data is the coarse body, coarse mind. And within the body, within the chakras, the 5, 6, or 7 chakras, then the various neurochemical system. It's become popular to say the psychoneuroimmunological system. PNI, PNI, psychoneuro, PNIS. How would you pronounce that, Ed? I don't know. I like in the West for all the difficult to pronounce chemicals and diseases and situations. They like to use single letter abbreviations. PNIS. No, PN, yeah. Psycho, neuro, immunological system. Yeah. Pun is. Correct? Did I get the pronunciation right? Perfect. So our subtle body is our pun is. the psychoneurochemistry coursing through our system. And for that reason, when people have positive brain chemistry, they feel positive chakra, navel chakra energy, they feel very joyful and happy and so on. And when the energies go bad, even though the sensory phenomena is wonderful, there's no benefit. So behind the drama of the sensory, the world of the senses, you could say, behind that drama is the background of the more subtle consciousness arising based on these chemical flows. So I could be driving around the corner in New Delhi on my motorcycle and yikes, there's an elephant walking straight at me. Now, if the psychoneurochemistry is all in perfect balance and harmony, I would simply accelerate. Go this way as you're stepping, swirl right between the two legs and zip back, and he's taking his back leg forward and zip that way. Lucky I had my psychoneuro, my pin is working properly that day, psychoneuro immunology system working well that day, or I might have been crushed by an elephant. Which isn't a bad thing to be written on your tomb. Because I want to be buried in my own homeland, I think, in the graveyard where my ancestors were buried. And it would be quite okay with me to say, here lies the squished remnants of Lama Glenn, who died riding a motorcycle trying to navigate between the two steps of the front legs, but just got his timing slightly wrong. As he swirled back the other way to go between the two hind legs, squish, crunch. He and the motorcycle in which the two became one pancake. Like a pancake with, I don't know, cranberries in it. Are buried together. Because their parts, due to the weight of the elephant, became... Now, that's too long an obituary on the typing would have to be too small. People wouldn't be able to read it. Here lies the noble Glenn who was squished by an elephant. Maybe that's enough, right? So this side, the subtle chemistry of the body, the neurochemistry or sympathetic system, would you say? What word would you use for that?
The subtle energy system.
The subtle drops that support a background to consciousness. So you've got everything. You're wealthy, not you, but you're wealthy. You've got a nice house, a good family, and everything's going well in your life with one little downside. You're depressed as hell because your psychoenergies drops aren't working well. Or you're jumpy as heck because your thyroidic energies are on overdrive. Or whatever of the four drops, the four main drops. Would you call that a psychoneuroimmunology system, or can you think of an easier word than PN is?
Sounds almost like the endocrine system.
Okay, let's call it the endocrine system. Endocrine system. E-S. Like the ES. That's better, easier to say than PN is. Something like that, yeah. So that system of Salung Tigle, we say, is your subtle body. And the mind it supports is a subtle consciousness, and it's always operating in the background. No matter what you're doing or where you go or whether you're asleep or awake, the coarse body supports the coarse consciousness and is one dimension of your experience on a more subtle level. Everything going on in the background. And even more subtle, the basic karmic energies that carry the soul, you could say. The energetic conglomerate which moves from lifetime to lifetime. We say it's not the real self because it's always in a state of change and transformation. But it's a little bit like a log jam on a river. Or a big lotus cluster floating around a lake. And the mind supporting that is an even more subtle state of mind. So I think in terms of mind, one of those we could call the conscious mind, one of those the subconscious mind, one of those the super unconscious mind. Or the super unconscious, something like that. Which is supported by the subtle body. So when we build the Vajra body by looking at the chakras and the nadis and the drops, we're basically trying to make a meditative platform where we can have more direct access to the subtle dimension of the body, the Salung Tigle or the Chakra Nadi Bindu, and to the states of consciousness that arise from those. So the purpose of Chandali Yoga, or as the Hindus mispronounce it, Kundalini, and Tibetans translate as tummo, and we Irish English speakers like to use the word ferocious lady or hot mama. Our marcha, our red element, based on the navel chakra. Purpose of building the Vajra body is to get more direct access to the subtle body and the subtle states of mind supported by that subtle body. And if we can do that, then we can get to the very subtle. And getting to the very subtle is that very subtle body which is the conglomerate of karmic instincts, you could say, from previous lives. And so often we say ordinary spiritual practice mostly works on the basis of the coarse body and the coarse mind. And if we can get to the subtle, we amplify, intensify the degree of the spiritual, we accelerate the degree of spiritual practice 1,000 times over.
In the instruction that you had in the last session, I wasn't clear as to when we breathe in and when we breathe out as we direct our attention to the channels.
When there's no air in your lungs, breathe in. And after your lungs are full, breathe out.
Then as we breathe in, we go down
I think the point here, in this very early stage, it's called building the Vajra body, is just to put the concentration on the center of the body, up and down the center of the body. And I think the visualization of the channels in this way is just to reduce the activity of the flow of energies to the external world. It's a kind of an internalization of the energies, you could say. I think that's the main purpose of it. Someone asked a question at the beginning, after the end of that session, and asked me a question privately. I mentioned there's a statement. That's fine. Yeah, just put it there. That's fine. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. And there's a statement in the Tantric text that wherever you put the consciousness, like if you concentrate on the tip of your little finger, the energies sort of come to the tip of your little finger. There's sort of wherever you place your concentration in the body, that acts as a magnet to the energies. It draws the energies to that place. So at this first step, we're basically just trying to have a sense of the center, the central energy process, centralizing of the energies. I think that's a little bit like in a Taoist manual I read when I was a teenager. They referred to it as the golden rod. Sort of this energy pathway from the inside of the skull, like just the top of the brain, all the way to the pelvic floor. That kind of pathway is kind of a natural centralization of your energies. So I think at this particular step of the three, just noticing the flowing breath and how the breath comes in and it seems to move down through the body. But we're seeing how the down flow kind of impacts the whole psychoneuroimmunology system. So I think like that. So just breathe, at this point we're just breathing in a natural way without doing pause breathing or power breathing. So we started in our session by doing, if we were doing it as a sadhana, as a practice, over a long period of time. When we came up to this, we do our little sadhana, then we'd finish it with doing the simplification of the body, visualization as pure energy, then doing the yantras, the movements, then doing the empty body meditation, and then after the empty body, centralizing the energies in this central pathway, you could say, just by means of putting the mind on that visualization, on the principle that where you put the mind, the energies follow. Yeah.
If we're working with a sadhana text and there's mantra recitation for that, we do the tummo exercises before we get to the mantra?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then coming out of that, we would go into the mantra
Right,
repetitions.
yeah.
Okay.
Now the next part is really looking at the channel petals of the central channel. What's called the channel petals. If you look at the illustration, they sort of look like little spikes. Like here, we sort of, at each of the channel petals, little spikes coming out kind of thing. Often on Indian paintings are painted like little lotus flowers. So they're called channel petals. But I always mention in Buddhist yoga, we visualize them more like plumbing pipes or something like that. Usually in texts when they describe them or talk about them, they begin with the heart chakra. We say at the heart chakra where the energy channels all flow, then at the center of the heart chakra, it's as though they come out in one in each of the 4 directions. And after a little bit, break into 2. So the 4 become 8. So sometimes you see it painted just with like a lotus flower at the heart with 8 petals. But it's more like these channel petals come out and they rise up like an umbrella upside down. And here they don't, in the illustration, he just copies the way they're done in a Tibetan manual. But often you'll see them reaching up like this. Oh, sorry. The heart goes down. The navel goes up. The throat goes up and the crown goes down. So they go out and like lotus petals stretch down like this. This way, and then 2 and 2. And then they're done like 8, 16, 32, 64. They often put them like that. And I think they talk about the heart first because the heart only has 8. Everything else is a multiple of 8. And if you talk about them in other ways, you may become bewildered. And at the throat chakra, going up 16. So 2 becomes 4, becomes 16, stretching out and going up at the throat chakra. And at the crown, or middle of the brain chakra, 16 become 32. 2 become 4, become 8, become 16, become 32. And they go out and reach down. Then the navel is 64 going up. So the easiest way to explain them in terms of a visual take is the navel chakra 64 reaching up, the heart chakra 8 going down, the throat chakra 16 up, and the head chakra 32 going down, something like that. So many of the tantric mandalas will have 8 deities in it, for instance, for the 8 heart chakras. So here we have Heruka and consort, Hivajra and consort with the 8 dakinis, these being the 8 channel petals at the heart, representing the energies of the heart petals at the channel petals at the heart. And then at the top of in the center one in the brain, the white moon disk, the essence of our male energies. So often they say like the size of a chickpea cut flat, looking a little bit like a flat chickpea, cut in half. And in the navel chakra, the red sun disk, nature of the sun, our female energies, again like half a chickpea. So we have the body empty and the 3 main channels. And if we put it at the heart level, we sort of look out and see like these going out and flowing down. We put ourselves in the navel channel, we see ourselves going out to 4 ways, and then 8 and 64, and going up inside the throat chakra, 16 flowing up. So we say the upward rising ones are in the nature of fire, and the downward flowing ones in the nature of water, in terms of the channel petals. So then we put our minds on those, and the next thing we do is we put a single syllable in each chakra. And Tibetan texts like to begin in the navel chakra, which is nice, because then it's like ascending order, rather than when they talk about the number of channeled petals, they begin in the heart and then go down. And the navel chakra, they put this simple little red letter Ah, which is shaped like an Ah stroke. So it's called Ah Tung in Tibetan, little Ah. But it doesn't mean it's any littler than big Ah. It's just a different letter of the alphabet. So they're written different in Sanskrit and they're written different in Tibetan. But the way the Ah is written here is the way the Sanskrit is written today. And it's often said to just be like a thorn standing upright. And in Asia, they have these particular kind of thorn bushes where the thorn is quite long and very narrow. As to say the thorn on a rose bush, which is kind of sort of short and dumpy. And in the heart chakra, usually we put the syllable hung, blue hung. But here, because it's in the nature of water and downflowing, it's put upside down. So if you don't know Tibetan letters or Sanskrit letters, you can just kind of put it like a squiggle. What kind of a tummo practitioner are you? I'm a squiggly tummo practitioner. And we'll hop up to the crown chakra. And they put an upside down white Ha, which looks a little bit like the English number 5, just hanging upside down kind of thing. But it can just be sort of a squiggle hanging down. The shape doesn't matter, I think. And the throat, a red Om standing upright. And the manuals on practicing tummo says, when you build the Vajrabhati, then put your mind on these. And then first, put your mind on the white Ha, the moon disk in the center of the brain, at the center of the central channel. And there's the moon disk and the white Ha hanging upside down from it. And just keep it there for a moment or two. And this stimulates the brain chemistry to some extent, sort of a mild stimulation of the brain chemistry. And then put it on the red Om at the throat chakra. Now these are quite small, because they're standing, either standing on or hanging from either a moon or a sun. So when it's a moon, they're hanging, and when it's a sun, they're standing. Fire rises, water descends, is the idea. And hold it there for a couple of minutes. Then on the blue Hung, in the heart chakra. And finally, on the Ah stroke, the Atung, the little Ah, but just Ah stroke, in the navel chakra. So when we first do the tummo training, it's good with each session do the sadhana up to the end of becoming the deity, then to simplify the visualization and do the exercises, yantra. Then body is empty and filled with radiant, joyful energy. And then the basic three channels, three energy channels. Then the four chakras with the four, each of them having its own syllable. So if one does each of those for roughly a week to just kind of get used to doing them, you could say, to get accustomed to them as part of a sadhana, so part of a daily practice. And then mind first on the white Ha at the center of the brain, and all of the brain energies get stimulated and the drops brought to the brain chakra, and like, as we said earlier, putting the mind somewhere the energies and drops are drawn there. And as we saw earlier in the simple practices, Om Ahum at these three places, then this is the Kalachakra waking consciousness. So this is very waking and reviving. It's wakeful and reviving. Putting on the throat chakra stimulates, you could say, proper passion tension. When we associate these with the five Buddhas, we put Amitabha Buddha here, Buddha of boundless light. And that really represents transformation of desire or passion or lust or whatever one wants to use into pure perception, pure radiant perception, pure radiant experience. So you could say putting it here sort of finely tunes the guitar strings of our a state of mental tension, turned appropriately high and tight, that the music is beautiful and radiant, like Buddha of boundless light, but not too tight that we become anxious and stressed. Often it's said when our thyroidic energies become too strong, we become hyper. And when they become too weak, we become lethargic and sort of sleepy. Yeah, the son of some of my friends in Pittsburgh, their son recently had the thyroid removed because of medical issue. And the issue then becomes getting the synthetic thyroid chemistry balanced perfectly. So here you could say putting the drop here is supposed to do this kind of tuning the guitar of the tension of the mind, bringing the proper intensity and passion to the presence of consciousness, but not so intense that it becomes overwhelming. A little bit like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. At first he's overly enthusiastic in his admiration for the lady, and each time he just gets slapped. And he has to continue reliving that day till he gets the energy level just perfect. Then he's just about to win her heart, or has won his heart, and he falls asleep and misses his big chance at romance. Was that movie a comedy or a tragedy? So then we put concentration on the heart and the hung hanging upside down. Blue hung. And this is supposed to induce a kind of a deep relaxation in our meditation. And then we come down to the navel chakra. And the red ah standing upright on a sun disk. So when we're training in the tummo, we just put for a few minutes on each of those four in descending order. So putting in the crown, the drop of waking consciousness, putting in the throat, the drop of dreamy consciousness, you could say, putting in the heart, the drop of deep rest consciousness, and putting in the navel, the thought of great bliss consciousness. And the manual said, well, when you're first doing the tummo practice for some time, just put the mind on the ah like that and just hold it at the navel chakra for the extent of your meditation session, sort of like doing a shamatha or a shine or a samadhi training, like a meditative concentration training. And just putting it there for a prolonged period of time draws the energies there. And you sort of slowly weave or work your way into generating or intensifying the tummo powers. And after doing that for some time, then we'll start doing it with breathing, vase breathing, and intensifying it with the churning and so forth, the various yantra or physical exercises. So this is called building the Vajra body, and then relating to our body as the sun above, the moon above and the sun below. And the energies between these, the upward flaring fire of our female energies and the downward flowing coolness of our male energies. In Indian and Buddhist literature, the sun emanates warm rays and the moon emanates cool rays. The sun in the nature of fire and the moon in the nature of water. The sun, the essence of the feminine passion, and the moon, the essence of male cool. Like a cool operator. Yeah, so let's do that for about 10 minutes. Is that okay? For 10 minutes, we generate this image within our body. 3 side channels. 4 chakras, sun below, moon above, the 4 syllables. And first, just put the mind on this as a whole unit, and then putting it at the syllable white ha in the crown chakra. And when you do this, you're supposed to kind of observe the energy fluctuations and the fluctuations in consciousness. So becoming familiar with those, I think, is key to progress in the practice. So first on the ha. And then on the red ah in the throat chakra, standing upright. Then the blue hung in the heart chakra. And then the ah stroke on the sun disk in the center of the navel chakra. And with all four of these, it's not as though we are somewhere in our brain looking down at them or somewhere outside looking at them from a distance, but as though our body was actually that little syllable and we're looking out from it in all directions. So in this case, in the little ah, we are that little ah sitting on the sun disk looking out. And as we look out, we see the 64 channel petals going out and rising up. Yeah. So the manual say at the beginning of tummo practice to prevent any kind of undesirable side effects, then to do without any vase breathing or pressing while visualizing at the central in the little ah. But once you've sort of settled into it, then to do the vase breathing and the tummy twirl and the snap and so forth, and that encourages the energies to enter the central channel. And I think if we do that now just for a few minutes, because usually after eating a lunch, mid-afternoon, people can get a little bit sleepy from sitting and meditating and not moving. And if you snap the tummy and roll it around with the vase breathing, it's very reviving. So let's do that again, okay? We're going to see our body like this. First we do the 9-round breath. And then we do with the vase breath. First just 3 breaths, pulling in, press down and pull up, and pressing the energies into the little ah. And hold for about 30 seconds or so. Then we do breathing in, pressing into the navel chakra and the little ah. And as we hold, pressing down and pulling up the muscles of pelvic floor, as we hold, twirling 3 times clockwise and 3 times counterclockwise. And then 3 times when we breathe in deeply, press down, pull up, and then extend the tummy down and out. And then snap it back. When we do that concluding one where we hold the hands like this and we take a deep breath. You're supposed to shake your arms a little bit. Anyone who has gotten slightly sleepy and groggy from a warm afternoon meditation gets revived. And your body also heats up quite a bit. So people will probably be feeling a bit warmer than they were before doing the practice.
So we just looked at the ha being on the crown chakra, and the om being at the throat chakra. And earlier we talked about om,
Hung.
om, hum. So
Yeah, so the Om Hung is a general practice done in generation stage when one sees oneself in a Buddha form in every Tantra. So if you're practicing a Kriya Tantra, a simple one like Shenrezi, where you just become simple little Shenrezi and send out lights and do a couple of magical deeds in the world to benefit the world, you always put Om Hung in those three places. And sometimes deity, as well as the Hung at the heart, will have a bija, or a seed syllable of that Buddha family. For instance, Avalokiteshvara also has Hri, so the Hri will be at the heart. Or Tara has Tam, so Tara will have Om Hung, and you're focusing on the Om Hung. And then from the Hung at my heart go out lights, and they touch all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, delighting them. And then they touch all living beings and move them in ways of great compassion. And then they come back into me, sort of like that. And then then this transforms and becomes, and so on and so forth. Then when you do the mantra, instead of putting the Tibetan word is you relax that visualization. It's not like you ask, where did they go? You just relax that visualization. And instead, you put your mind, concentration at the heart. And say in Avalokiteshvara, and at the heart is the syllable, is a moon disk standing up on it, a white syllable Hri, and around it the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Or if it's Tara, a green Tam, and around Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha, the 10-syllable mantra, or in Vajrasattva Hum, and the 100-syllable mantra, which means they have to be very small to get all 100 standing on that little moon. And then you do the mantra recitation from that Hri, if it's Avalokiteshvara, Tam, or whatever. So these are kind of methods of centralizing the energy that change depending on what the context of the practice. So when we're doing tummo, we drop the Om Hung awareness altogether. We just do that in the generation stage, in the sadhana of taking the three kayas as the path. And then we get up to before the mantras and we relax that visualization. And then we become, in our mind, just a sort of a two-armed form, or we become like this, just a simple Buddha form, and looking a little bit like Buddha and whatnot, and do the three channels, and with the 4 chakras and the 4 syllables, Ha, Om, Hum, Ah. Yeah, so you don't have to worry, where did that Om go? Did I lose my Om? Where should I put it? It just kind of disappeared.
So there's no particular significance of changing the syllables to.
There's a
places.
great significance, yes, super significance. The meaning is all different. When we do generation stage, we're thinking of body as Nirmanakaya, speech, meaning emotion and thoughts, as Sambhogakaya, and mind as Dharmakaya. So that's the significance there. When we change these mantras, we're thinking Ah in the navel as the essence of all the female quality of wisdom. So Ah is like a completely open note. You can do anything with Ah. It can become anything. So it's often said all the teachings of all the wisdom teachings of all Buddhas, past, present, and future, are expressed in the simple sound Ah. And Ha is a male sound, so it's in the crown chakra for the male element. So the meaning is just male and female in the two. poles of the central channel at that point. And the Om in the throat chakra is the natural purity of all things. It's red because it's passionate and in the nature of Amitabha. And the Hung in the heart is the essence of the 5 primordial awarenesses or timeless awarenesses, or we could call them the 5 radiances of the soul. So in other words, the sort of symbolism or significance is different. And some texts will talk about those to some degrees, and others will just say, visualize like this. And I think when you visualize like that, then the red is kind of a warm color. If you want to feel cool in your room, you put white or blue. If you want to feel warm in your room, you paint red. It has a kind of a warming color to it psychologically, I think.
So the awe is creation, the red of creation, like ultimate creation, and the white ha is like a stabilizing, cooling force. If we're kind of going back there, then
I don't know about where that word creation comes from. In what way?
That was my own interpretation. So
Oh,
apparently
okay.
faulty. So
Yeah. So I wasn't sure what that is. I think the meaning is simply that represents the openness of the feminine side of our organism, of us as a being, any individual as a being. And the ha represents the specific aggression or sort of creative interference with the flow of perception. Like, I don't like that bush over there. I'm going to dig it up and plant it over there. I think it's a kind of a very simple idea, but the idea is one is the ability to appreciate openly, and the other is the idea to push and pull to suit our fancy on a kind of a basic level. And so we often say one is aggression and one is pure awareness or wisdom. So male energy should be aggression, which easily becomes anger and violence, should be transformed into compassion. And pure awareness, which appreciates all things, can easily become sort of desire or wanting this or wanting that, can easily be transformed into the deepest experience of embracing the infinity of being. That kind of language is used. Now, in some of the tantric systems, and including some lineages of Six Yogas of Naropa, you don't just put these 4 syllables, but in the tunnels of the 8 channel petals, you put a separate syllable on each channel. And when you do the practice at the heart, you sort of imagine the fire going into there and that sound resonating and that channel opening, and you come up to the 16 and the 16 syllables, and here and 32 syllables, and each one in each of the 32, and in the navel the 64, and so forth. But Pamo Trukpa, the guru of the first Drikongpa, said, that's overkill. No need for all that. Simplicity gets the job done better than complexity. So when I was teaching in the Bunpo Center in Pittsburgh one time, the Buns like have a very, like that more complicated one syllable in each of the chakras, each of the channel petals in each of the chakras. So you have 8 and 16 and 32 and 64, and each with its own color and resonance and so on. But in the Six Yogas of Naropa, I think one of the reasons it's so popular is it simplified the practice of tummo to bare essentials, so that anyone could do it quite effectively without getting tied up in the detail.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.